All right, so as we look at the Cuban Missile Crisis here, the one thing I want to point out to start with, I want to make sure that we are done with the notes on the Cuban Missile Crisis. So if you're doing these as subplans, as some of you are, make sure you've done the near pod that goes through the notes. It has some questions in it. You make sure you do that first. That is the first thing to do. Then we shift over to doing this assignment. Um, because that gives you the context you need to be able to answer the second question on each one of these pages. So we're going to just run through these cartoons quick. I'm not going to give you answers necessarily, so you're still going to need to do some stuff um, to figure a few things out. You may need to use your notes and things like that, but I will explain a lot. And then again, I can check in class how you're doing, especially on that second question. All right, here's our first cartoon. If this is 2026, March of 2026, this is page 13 of your packet. Okay, so what do we see or read, right? That's what we always do first. Way too many of you, prior times we've done this, have just written one or two things, right? You should see more than one or two things. So what I want you to do right now, pause this video, write down what you see. I'm about to talk about what I see. It doesn't matter what I see, though. You're the one doing this. So why don't you pause right now and write down what you see or read or notice? Then unpause it, and then maybe I point out a few other things that you didn't see, and it helps you to look a little deeper. So I'm going to one at a time go through some things. So pause it right now. Now I'm going to assume you've unpaused it, and here we go to point out some stuff. So first of all, let's look at what these gentlemen are sitting on. Now, the context, of course, is you just talked about the Cuban Missile Crisis in class, right? So that maybe should help you understand what this is. And look what they're sitting on. They're sitting on missiles. Okay, so here we go. I don't know why I was just drawing with my mouse pad when I have a touchscreen. So they're sitting on missiles. Okay. It says H. I can probably assume these are hydrogen bombs. They're just a stronger type of bomb. So we're fine. We're still good. I do notice that they're sweating also. So they're a little nervous. I notice they're struggling in this arm wrestling match they're doing. That's something else I've noticed. And maybe it's going like a little bit back and forth, right? I also notice their fingers near the button. This here is Kennedy, and this is Khrushchev. So if you see a cartoon with a younger, handsome-ish man with a full head of hair, and next to a sort of angry or nervous bald guy, it's probably Kennedy, and Khrushchev is the bald guy. Okay, so Nikita Khrushchev, John F. Kennedy, that's who's in this cartoon. All right. But I want to point out something. So Kennedy here, this guy, the guy with the hair, is by a button which is connected to the missile that Khrushchev is sitting on. We can assume Khrushchev's does the same. You see it goes here, so I can assume there's a wire. So I can assume it goes under to Kennedy's in the same place, implying, remember, we talked about the theory mutually assured destruction. If they fight a war and one side starts to lose, they might be tempted to use the atomic bomb, leading to the other side retaliating, assuring both of their destruction, mutually assured destruction. So those are all the things I see or notice. I already kind of told you what this cartoon's about, right? It's about the Cuban Missile Crisis and how this standoff that's occurring between the US and the Soviet Union. So there is that page. I think this will all go away when I switch slides. Let's find out. Yeah. Okay. So once again, the first question, what are some things you see or read or notice in this cartoon? List as many things as possible. Do not just say, they both look mad. Awesome. That's all you saw in the whole cartoon because you need to see more than that to get this right. So pause it right now. What do you see, read, notice, and then unpause it once you've written your list and you're out of stuff. And now you've unpaused, hopefully. Hopefully you actually listen to me because I do know what I'm talking about. Okay, so first thing I notice, we got two trees. We have over here, it says US bases. So these are the US bases, and we got a whole lot of branches also. This tree looks bigger, healthier. We have some country labels: West Germany, Turkey, Japan. Okay. Remember in the last cartoon, if you see a handsome-ish guy with a full head of hair and a either nervous or angry bald guy, it's probably Kennedy and Khrushchev. Just keep that in mind. Uh, Over here, we have Cuba. What are we talking about right now? Oh, Cuban Missile Crisis. Interesting. So we have one little branch hanging over into the U.S. yard because Kennedy is the U.S. president. Khrushchev is the leader of the Soviet Union. Hints on pruning. Pruning is trimming back a branch. Now, there's multiple ways you could look at this in terms of why they're reading that book. Are they looking to prune the other guy's tree that's hanging over? Or are they looking to prune their own tree? Maybe that's a little more hopeful of a way to look at it. But if you look at Kennedy, that one little branch is hanging over and he's mad. So, what is this cartoon pointing out? Pruning again, trimming trees. The title, we didn't talk about that. Over the garden walls. So we have the fence here, right? I don't know why I bothered circling the fence. You have big fence. A whole lot is hanging over Khrushchev's, and only this one little branch is hanging over in Kennedy's yard, right? And Kennedy's getting mad. This is about the Cuban Missile Crisis. It is pointing out the fact that, and this is what Khrushchev said. This is, by the way, a British cartoon. So it's a British perspective of the Cuban Missile Crisis, that we got to a crisis for the U.S. reaction of a missile getting near them, a base, a Soviet base being near them. And yet the Soviet Union was like, you have bases in Turkey and Germany and Japan, and you are all around us. That one base was seen as like countering that maybe a little bit. So again, the Cuban Missile Crisis, it's about that. That's not the main idea, though. That's what you're meant to do. So again, tie in the different bases, the number of things, the branch of Cuba, and sort of what this fight and argument is about as you go. So you should have a long list of things you see and notice before you move on. So pause this, finish up that cartoon. Now let's go to the final one. Listen, if you understood the last cartoon, frankly, you should understand this one. So again, first question, what do you see? What do you read? What do you notice? So let's start with that. And then you're going to pause right now. Now you've unpaused, hopefully. And we're going to go one at a time through things. Another British cartoon, just a side note, you don't know that, but I know that, so I'm telling you. Over here, we got like some of the US flag and what looks to be maybe the White House. The title, Intolerable, having your rockets on my doorstep. Here is the hammer and sickle of the Soviet Union. Here is Soviet base in Cuba. We have the US flag on way more missiles, right? We only have two over here. We have four here. And this one is labeled US bases in Turkey, Persia, etc., etc., etc. We have some traditional Eastern European / Russian architecture in the background. So, intolerable having your rockets in my doorstep. This guy appears to be pointing. He's moving his hand. He looks to be talking, right? So he is probably the one saying this. We know, young-ish, handsome-ish man, full head of hair. It's probably Kennedy, an angry bald guy in the same cartoon as a handsome-ish man with a full head of hair. Probably Khrushchev, especially again, the context of the missiles being there. Now, what is the main idea? Let's think back to our last cartoon. The one, and I don't want to take away all the things I've circled here, the one with the fence, right? You can look back at that for a second as you're listening to this. It's a similar idea. Right on the last page, you had all the US bases leaning over into the Soviet yard. and only one leaning over. Here's Kennedy freaking out. Get all these rockets off my doorstep. Or intolerable having your rockets on my doorstep. And here is Khrushchev going, are you kidding? He looks annoyed. Look at all these missiles over here, and you're making a big deal out of those, right? It goes back again, that mutually assured destruction idea. Both of them, Khrushchev feels like he's responding in a way that puts the U.S. under a similar threat, right? Um, so use all that information, come up with the main idea for this cartoon as well. Um, again, you should have, before you did any of this, have done the notes on that page. And uh, hopefully that gives you um, a pretty good sense of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The U.S. trying to keep Soviet influence out of the Western Hemisphere. Kind of could look at it as containment policy in that way, trying to keep that influence out, even though Castro already ally with Soviet Union, even more influence and power with the bombs. Also, look at the cartoon you have. Again, if this is 2026, it's on page 10 with the world being squeezed by the bombs. That's what the Cuban Missile Crisis in many ways felt like as well. This world crisis playing out over a period of 13 days. All right. So that is that. Uh, continue just working on stuff in class.